My phone started vibrating at 2:17 in the morning. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and again. By the time I reached for it, I had 23 missed calls, all from my mother. That alone was enough to make my stomach turn. My mom and I hadn't spoken in almost 3 years. Not really. A few cold texts on holidays, a birthday message that only said, "Hope you're doing well." Nothing more. So 23 calls in the middle of the night? Something was wrong. Then I saw the voicemail notification. I pressed play. For a few seconds, there was only heavy breathing. Then my mother's voice, panicked, almost desperate. "Call me back. It's about Grandma. Please, just call me." I sat up in bed. My heart started pounding. My grandmother. The woman who had practically raised me, the only person in my family who had ever made me feel loved. The only one who used to slip $20 bills into my backpack and whisper, "Every girl should have emergency money." The woman who baked my favorite peach pie every birthday. The woman I hadn't seen in 6 months. Not because I didn't want to, because my mother wouldn't let me. I immediately called back straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. Again, nothing. Then my phone rang. It was my Aunt Susan. I answered before the first ring finished. She was crying. Real crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deep. I already knew. I just didn't want to hear it. "Emily," she whispered. I couldn't breathe. "Grandma passed away an hour ago." The room went completely silent. I don't remember dropping my phone. I don't remember getting out of bed. I only remember sitting on my bedroom floor and staring at the wall. She was gone, and I never got to say goodbye because my mother refused to let me see her. I thought that was the worst part. I was wrong. About 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. "Is this Emily Carter?" "Yes. My name is Daniel Harris. I'm your grandmother's attorney." "Attorney?" I sat up. "I was instructed to contact you immediately after her passing." I felt my stomach drop. "There is something your grandmother wanted you to hear." I couldn't speak. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. "Your grandmother left a letter. And, according to her instructions, it must be read in front of your entire family." Silence. I looked at the clock, 2:53 a.m. "What does the letter say?" I finally asked. "I'm sorry," he replied. "I can't tell you." Another pause. "But I can tell you this. Your grandmother believed that once this letter is read, nothing in your family will ever be the same again." I just sat there, frozen. What could possibly be in that letter? And why did my grandmother wait until after she died to reveal it? Before I tell you what happened, tell me where you're watching from. Because what happened after my grandmother's funeral completely changed my life and exposed a secret my mother had spent years trying to bury. But the story really started 5 years earlier. Desursish. I was 32 then, divorced, working as a medical receptionist in a small clinic outside Chicago. I wasn't rich. I didn't own a big house or drive a fancy car, but I had a quiet little life that I loved. I had my apartment, my rescue dog, Daisy, a few good friends, and every Sunday afternoon I had my grandmother. Those Sundays meant everything to me. We'd drink tea, bake cookies, and talk for hours, sometimes about serious things, sometimes about absolutely nothing. She used to say, "The world moves too fast. Sit down and enjoy your coffee while it's still hot." I missed that voice every day. My family, on the other hand, was complicated. Actually, complicated is a nice way of putting it. The truth is, I always felt like an outsider, especially with my mother. No matter what I did, it was never enough. If I got good grades, my younger brother Ryan got more praise. If I got a promotion, my mother would find something wrong with it. If I brought flowers to a family dinner, she'd ask why I didn't bring wine instead. I spent most of my life trying to earn love that was never freely given. And my grandmother saw all of it. She never said much when I was younger, but as I got older, she started dropping little comments. Small things that didn't make sense at the time. Things like, "Some people only know how to love conditionally," or, "One day you'll understand why I worried about you." I never asked what she meant. I wish I had, because 6 months before she died, My mother did something that changed everything. She cut me off from my grandmother completely, and the reason she gave me made absolutely no sense. At least, not back then. I didn't know it yet. But my grandmother had already discovered something, a secret, one that my mother would do almost anything to keep buried. I grew up in a small town outside Chicago, the kind of place where everybody knew your business before you did. From the outside, my family looked perfect. My dad owned a hardware store. My mother, Linda, volunteered at church and never missed a neighborhood fundraiser. My younger brother Ryan was the golden child. And then there was me, the quiet daughter, the responsible one, the one who didn't cause trouble. At least, that's what everyone thought. The truth was, shoo. I learned very early that love in my family came with conditions. Ryan could do no wrong. If he forgot my mother's birthday, she'd laugh and call him forgetful. If I forgot to buy milk on the way home, she'd act like I had committed a crime. When Ryan got a C in high school, she said he was going through a hard time. When I got an A-, she asked why it wasn't an A. I spent years trying to win her approval. I never did. My father wasn't cruel. He was just absent. He let my mother make every decision. If she criticized me, he stayed quiet. If she ignored me, he looked away. The only person who really saw me was my grandmother, Margaret. Grandma lived 10 minutes away in a little white house with blue shutters and rose bushes in the front yard. To me, it felt like another world, a safe world. When I was little and my mother and I fought, Grandma would let me stay over. She'd make grilled cheese sandwiches and let me sleep in the guest room. She'd sit on the edge of the bed and say, "You don't have to earn love, sweetheart. Real love isn't a prize." At the time, I didn't understand what she meant. Years later, I finally would. After my divorce, things got worse with my mother. I had been married for 6 years. When my husband left, I was heartbroken. I didn't cheat. I wasn't abusive. We simply grew apart. It hurt anyway. When I told my mother, she looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "Maybe if you'd been easier to live with, he'd have stayed." I just stared at her. I couldn't believe she had said that. Grandma could. She immediately stood up from her chair and snapped, "That's enough, Linda." The room went quiet. "You don't kick your child when she's already down." My mother rolled her eyes. "Of course you're defending her again." Again, that word stayed with me because it meant this wasn't new. It meant my mother had always believed Grandma loved me more. Maybe she did. Or maybe Grandma simply loved me openly. Something my mother never learned how to do. After my divorce, I started spending more time with Grandma. Every Sunday. Sometimes Wednesdays too. We'd go grocery shopping, watch old movies, bake peach pies. She taught me how to grow tomatoes in pots on my apartment balcony. Little things. Ordinary things. The kind of memories you don't realize are precious until they're gone. Then one evening, while we were cleaning up after dinner, Grandpa said something strange. "You know, Emily, families keep secrets." I looked up from the dishes. "What kind of secrets?" She didn't answer right away. She stared out the kitchen window. The kind that change everything. I laughed. I thought she was talking about some old family drama. Then she looked at me, really looked at me. Her expression was serious, almost worried. "If something ever happens to me, don't let anyone make you doubt who you are." I frowned. "What does that mean?" She opened her mouth to answer, then the phone rang. It was my mother. And for some reason, the color drained from Grandma's face. She didn't answer my question. In fact, she never brought it up again. I should have pushed. I should have asked more questions, because only a few weeks later, my mother started doing something she'd never done before. She began keeping me away from my grandmother. And at first, Abby had no idea why. At first, it started with little things. I would call Grandma, and my mother would answer her phone. "She's sleeping, she's tired, she's at a doctor's appointment." Every excuse sounded reasonable, until it didn't. One Sunday morning, I baked Grandma's favorite blueberry muffins and drove to her house anyway. When I pulled into the driveway, my mother's car was already there. I smiled. I thought maybe we could all have coffee together. I never even made it to the front door. My mother stepped outside and shut the door behind her. "She's resting," she said. I held up the container of muffins. "I'll only stay for a few minutes." "No." I blinked. "No? She doesn't need visitors right now." "Mom, I'm not a visitor. I'm her granddaughter." Her jaw tightened. "Go home, Emily." Something felt wrong. Very wrong. I looked past her toward the living room window. The curtains were closed. Grandma never closed her curtains during the day. "Is she okay?" "Of course she is." "Then let me see her." No. That one word hit me harder than it should have. I tried to step toward the door. She blocked me, actually blocked me. I stared at her. "Why are you doing this? You need to respect boundaries." I almost laughed. Boundaries? Since when did a granddaughter need permission to see her own grandmother? Then my mother said something I still hear in my nightmares. "Grandma gets upset after you visit." I froze. "What?" "Your divorce, your problems, your life. It's stressful for her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "She told you that? She doesn't have to." I looked at the house again. Something wasn't right. I could feel it. "I just want to say hello. You need to leave." The words came out cold, almost rehearsed. I stood there for another few seconds. Then I left. I cried the whole drive home, but that wasn't the worst part. A few days later, I called Grandma's cell phone. No answer. Again? No answer. Then her phone was suddenly disconnected. I drove back to her house. No one answered the door. I left notes, flowers, voicemails. Nothing. It was like my grandmother had vanished. Then, 3 weeks later, my Aunt Susan called me. "Your mother says you've been upsetting Grandma." I nearly dropped my phone. "What?" "Linda says Grandma doesn't want visitors." "That's not true." There was a long silence. Then my aunt sighed. "I don't know what's going on." Neither did I. For the first time in my life, I felt completely helpless. I called my father. "Your mother says she needs rest." "You've actually seen her?" Silence. That silence told me everything. "No," he finally admitted. I sat there, stunned. Even my father wasn't being allowed to see her. Something was happening, something bad, but I had no proof. Months passed, 6 long months. Birthdays, holidays, Sunday afternoons. Gone every day. I wondered if Grandma was okay. Every day I worried she thought I had abandoned her. Then, one evening, I came home from work and found an envelope under my apartment door. No stamp, no address, just my name, Emily. Inside was a single photograph. It was old, at least 20 years old. In the picture, I was about 6 years old. I was sitting on Grandma's lap. She was smiling. On the back of the photo, in shaky handwriting, were 6 words: "Don't believe everything your mother says." I stopped breathing. It was Grandma's handwriting. I knew it instantly. My hands started shaking. When had she written this? Who had delivered it? Why now? I flipped the photo over again. Nothing else. No explanation. No note. No clue. I immediately drove to her house. The lights were on. My mother's car was there. So was Ryan's. I walked straight to the front door and knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Nothing. Then I heard movement inside. I knew someone was there. I knocked a 3rd time. The door finally opened. My brother stood there. He looked annoyed. "What are you doing here?" "I got a message from Grandma." His face changed. "Only for a second, but I saw it. You need to leave. I want to see her. She's asleep." "I don't believe you." Then my mother appeared behind him. The moment she saw the photograph in my hand, all the color drained from her face. I noticed immediately. She knew something. I held up the picture. "Why would Grandma send me this?" My mother stared at it. Then she said 4 words that made my blood run cold. "Where did you get that?" I didn't answer because suddenly I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the truth. And I had no idea that within a few months my grandmother would be gone. And her final letter would expose everything my mother had been hiding. I didn't answer my mother's question. I couldn't. Because for the first time in my life I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear, not anger, not annoyance. Fear. She took a step toward me. "Who gave you that picture?" I tightened my grip on it. "Why does it matter?" "Emily, answer me." "No. Not until you tell me why Grandma wrote this." My mother's expression hardened. "You're being dramatic." There it was, the same line she had used my entire life. "You're too sensitive, you're overreacting. You're being dramatic." I looked past her shoulder. I wanted to see my grandmother. Just once. I thought maybe she was sitting in her favorite chair. Maybe she'd hear my voice. Maybe she'd come to the door. But she never did. "Please," I whispered. "I just want to see her." My mother's eyes didn't soften, not even a little. "Go home." I looked at my brother. He wouldn't even look at me. That hurt almost as much. I turned and walked back to my car. I cried before I even reached the end of the street. That night, I sat on my kitchen floor, holding that old photograph. I kept reading the same 6 words. "Don't believe everything your mother says." Over and over. What was Grandma trying to tell me? I barely slept. The next morning, I called my Aunt Susan. No answers. I called my father. Straight to voicemail. I called my brother. Nothing. It was like everyone had suddenly decided to shut me out. Again. A few days later, I drove by Grandma's house after work. The curtains were closed. No lights. No movement. The house looked empty. Lonely. I sat in my car for nearly an hour. I don't know why. Maybe I hoped I'd see her in the window. Maybe I hoped she'd walk outside and wave. She never did. That became my routine. Work. Drive by Grandma's house. Sit in the car. Go home, repeat. I stopped sleeping properly. I stopped eating. Even my coworkers noticed. One afternoon, my friend and coworker Jenna pulled me aside. "You look exhausted." I tried to smile. "I'm okay." "No, you're not." That simple sentence broke me. I started crying right there in the staff room. I told her everything. The blocked visits, the photograph, the strange behavior, the feeling that something terrible was happening. When I finished, Jenna looked at me for a long moment. Then she asked a question I hadn't let myself ask. "What if your grandmother is trying to tell you something?" I stared at her. "What do you mean? What if there's a reason your mother doesn't want you around?" I didn't have an answer, but that question stayed with me. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Then came Thanksgiving. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invited to the family dinner. No call, no text, nothing. I spent the holiday alone with my dog, Daisy. I heated up a frozen dinner and ate it in silence. At one point, I looked at the empty chair across from me and started crying again. I wasn't just grieving my grandmother. I was grieving my entire family. I felt abandoned, forgotten, like I no longer existed to them. I thought things couldn't get any worse. I was wrong, because 2 weeks later, my phone rang, and the person on the other end said something that made my knees give out. "Emily, I think your mother has been lying to all of us." I gripped the phone so hard my hands started to hurt. It was my Aunt Susan. Her voice was shaking. "What do you mean?" I asked. There was a long pause. "I went to see your grandmother today." I sat up straighter. "And?" "She asked for you." I stopped breathing. "What?" "She asked why you haven't visited her." For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. I just sat there, then the tears came. Hot, angry tears. She thinks I stopped coming?" Susan's voice cracked. "Emily, I don't think she has any idea you've been trying to see her. I felt sick, absolutely sick, all those months, all those birthdays, all those Sundays. She thought I had abandoned her." I started crying so hard I could barely breathe. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no, that's not all," Susan said quietly. "There's more?" She sighed. "Your mother told everyone that you were too busy to visit. She said you needed space and didn't want to be involved." I covered my mouth. I couldn't believe it. My own mother had been lying, to my grandmother, to the family, to everyone. Why? I kept asking myself the same question. Why? But Susan didn't have an answer, neither did I. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 3 in the morning, I was sitting on my couch with Daisy curled beside me when I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't spend every day waiting for my family to love me. I couldn't keep begging for a place in a family that kept pushing me out. Something inside me finally broke, or maybe it healed. I'm still not sure. The next morning, I called a therapist. It was the first time in my life I had ever asked for help. I almost canceled the appointment 3 times. I didn't. And that decision changed everything. In therapy, I started saying things out loud that I had kept buried for years, how I always felt second best, how I spent my entire childhood trying to earn my mother's approval, how every criticism stayed with me, how every rejection made me work even harder for love that never came. One day my therapist looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "Emily, what if the problem was never you?" I just stared at her, because I had never considered that possibility, not once. For 32 years, I thought if I worked harder, loved more, gave more, my mother would finally choose me. Maybe there was nothing left to prove. Maybe there never had been. Slowly, my life started changing. I stopped driving past Grandma's house every night. I started sleeping again. I began taking long walks with Daisy. I started baking, reading, calling friends I had pushed away. I even accepted a promotion at work that I had been too afraid to take. For the first time in years, I started building a life that belonged to me, not one built around earning someone else's love. Around that time, my friend Jenna convinced me to join a community gardening group. I almost said no. Instead, I went. And that's where I met Claire. She was in her late 60s. Funny, kind, and completely incapable of minding her own business. By the second week, she had adopted me. She brought extra coffee, remembered my birthday, asked how I was doing, and actually waited for the answer. One afternoon, while we were planting tomatoes, she looked at me and said, "You seem lonely." I laughed. "I hide it that badly?" She smiled. "No, I just recognize it." Then she said something that nearly made me cry. "Family isn't always the people you were born to." Such a simple sentence, huge meaning. I thought about it for days, because for the first time in my life, I was beginning to understand something. Love shouldn't feel like a competition. It shouldn't have to be earned. It should feel safe, like Grandma's kitchen, like fresh peach pie, like someone saving a seat for you because they knew you were coming. I didn't know it then, but I was slowly building something I had never truly had before, a chosen family, and I was going to need them, because just when my life finally started feeling peaceful, a letter arrived, and everything changed again. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because it had been a good day. I had gotten through an entire therapy session without crying, and Claire had brought homemade lemon bars to the garden. For once, I felt lighter. Then I opened my mailbox. There was only one envelope inside, no stamp, no return address, just my name. Emily Carter. My stomach dropped. I had seen this before, the photograph, the handwriting. I knew immediately it was from Grandma, or at least it had something to do with her. I unlocked my apartment, sat at the kitchen table, and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper, one sentence. "That's all. Ask about the blue box." I read it again and again. The blue box? What blue box? There was no explanation, no signature, nothing. I turned the paper over, blank. I checked the envelope, epsira. I sat there for nearly 20 minutes, trying to remember. Then, suddenly, I did, a memory. I was 10 years old. I was sitting at Grandma's kitchen table drawing pictures while she baked cookies. She had opened a small blue metal box and taken out some papers. I remembered because I had asked if it was a treasure chest. She laughed and said, "In a way, it is." At the time, I thought nothing of it. But now my heart was racing. What was in that box, and why did she want me to ask about it? I called Aunt Susan immediately. "Do you remember Grandma having a blue box?" Silence. Then I heard her inhale sharply. "Oh my God, you remember it?" "Of course I do. What was in it?" "I don't know. Your grandmother never showed me." "Then why are you reacting like that?" Another long pause. "Because she used to keep it hidden." A chill ran through me. "What do you mean?" "She kept it in her bedroom closet. Locked. She never let anyone touch it. Locked, a locked box, and now she wanted me to ask about it. Or maybe she wanted me to find it." "Do you think it's still at the house?" I asked. "I honestly don't know." I looked at the note again. My hands were shaking. Then Susan said something strange. "Emily, your mother hated that box." I blinked. "What?" "I don't know why. They argued about it once." "What kind of argument?" "I didn't hear everything. I only remember your grandmother saying, It's not yours to destroy. I froze. Teed? Why would my mother want to destroy a box? And what could possibly be inside it? That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Grandma's words from years ago. Families keep secrets. Don't let anyone make you doubt who you are. Who you are, not what you know. Who you are. By morning, I had a terrible feeling in my stomach, a feeling that this wasn't about money, or an inheritance, or old family documents. This was something else, something much bigger. Then my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered. A calm male voice spoke. Ms. Carter? Yes, my name is Daniel Harris. I'm your grandmother's attorney. I sat up. I believe we need to talk about a blue box. And suddenly, AP knew my life was about to change forever. I couldn't speak. For a few seconds, I just held the phone to my ear, then I finally whispered, You know about the blue box? Yes, Mr. Harris said calmly. Your grandmother instructed me to contact you if you ever asked about it. A chill ran down my spine. She planned this. Somehow, she knew. When can we meet? I asked. As soon as possible. I took the rest of the day off work. An hour later, I was sitting in Mr. Harris's office. He was in his late 60s, with kind eyes and a stack of folders on his desk. Beside him sat a small blue metal box. The blue box, I hadn't seen it in over 20 years. My heart started pounding. Is that? He nodded. Your grandmother left this in my care 6 months ago. 6 months. Exactly when my mother had started keeping me away from her. I looked at him. Why? He folded his hands. Because she was afraid. Afraid of what? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. She believed your mother was trying to keep something from you. The room suddenly felt too warm. I stared at the blue box. What is in there? Mr. Harris slid a key across the desk. She wanted you to open it yourself. My hands were shaking. I unlocked the box. Inside were several old photographs, a small journal, a few legal documents, and a sealed envelope with my name written on it. I picked up the envelope first. The paper was worn. The handwriting was unmistakable. Grandma's. I opened it. Inside was a short letter. I still remember every word. My dearest Emily, if you are reading this, then I am gone. And if your mother has kept you away from me, then I was right to worry. I need you to know something important. I have loved you every day of your life, and I promised your father that I would protect the truth until the right time. The time has come. The man who raised you is not your biological father. I stopped reading. The room went silent. I looked up at Mr. Harris. I couldn't breathe.
What?
He didn't say anything. I looked back at the letter. My hands were trembling. Your biological father was a man named Michael Carter. He was my son. Your mother became pregnant while they were dating. Michael died in a car accident before you were born. After his death, your mother married Robert, who agreed to raise you as his own. But over the years, your mother blamed you for everything she lost. She blamed you for Michael's death because he was driving home to see her when the accident happened. It was never your fault. Never. I burst into tears. All my life, all those years. I had wondered why my mother looked at me differently, why I never felt fully loved, why she treated Ryan one way and me another. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't too sensitive. I wasn't difficult. I was carrying the weight of a tragedy that happened before I was even born, and she had blamed me for it. I couldn't stop crying. Mr. Harris quietly handed me a box of tissues. I kept reading. I wanted to tell you many times. But I promised your father I would wait until you were ready. I don't believe your mother ever forgave herself, and instead of carrying her grief, she placed it on your shoulders. That was wrong. You deserved better. I covered my mouth. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had said those words to me. You deserved better. Then I noticed another document. A birth certificate. My original birth certificate. The father's name read, Michael Carter. I stared at it for a long time. Then I picked up one of the photographs. A young man with dark hair, a warm smile. He looked like me. The same eyes, the same smile, the same dimple in his left cheek. I started crying all over again. I had spent my entire life feeling like I didn't belong, and suddenly, there he was. My father, the man I had never met, Then Mr. Harris cleared his throat. "There's one more thing." I looked up. He slid another envelope toward me. "This is the letter your grandmother wanted read in front of your entire family after her passing." I stared at it. It was sealed, untouched. "What's in it?" He shook his head. "I don't know." "You haven't read it?" "No." I looked at the envelope, then at the blue box, then back at the photograph of my father. Everything I thought I knew about my family had just changed, and somehow Abe had a feeling the worst was still to come, because in 3 days, at my grandmother's funeral, that final letter would be read aloud, and my mother's biggest secret would finally be exposed. 3 days later, I walked into my grandmother's funeral carrying the blue box. Every pair of eyes turned toward me. I hadn't seen most of my family in months. Aunt Susan stood up immediately and hugged me. My father looked exhausted. Ryan wouldn't meet my eyes. And my mother, she looked terrified. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Then I noticed her staring at the blue box in my hands. She knew. She knew exactly what it was. The service itself was beautiful. People talked about Grandma's kindness, her baking, her generosity, the way she always remembered everyone's birthday. I cried through most of it. Not because she was gone, but because I had lost so much time with her, time that had been stolen. After the service, everyone gathered in a small room at the funeral home. That's when Mr. Harris stood up. "I have something Margaret asked me to read after her passing." The room became quiet. My mother suddenly looked pale. "Now?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. She swallowed hard. Maybe this isn't the right time. It was her final request. No one said another word. Mr. Harris opened the envelope. Then he began reading. "To my family, if this letter is being read, I am gone. I need the truth to finally be spoken. Especially for Emily." I heard my mother inhale sharply. Mr. Harris continued. "Emily spent her entire life believing she was somehow less loved, less wanted, and less important. That was never because of her. It was because of our family's silence." My mother looked down. She wouldn't lift her head. "Linda, I begged you for years to tell your daughter the truth. I begged you to stop punishing her for a tragedy she did not cause. Michael's death was an accident. Emily was innocent. She was always innocent." The room was completely silent. I looked around. My aunt was crying. My father looked confused. Ryan's face had gone white. Then Mr. Harris read the part that changed everything. "And to answer the question I know many of you have asked. No, Emily stopped visiting me because Linda would not allow it. My daughter told me that Emily no longer cared. She told Emily that I no longer wanted visitors." Both statements were lies. Gasps filled the room. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." I looked at my mother. She had tears running down her face, but she still said nothing. Emily never abandoned me. She loved me until my final day. I only wish I had been brave enough to tell her everything sooner. Please do not let her carry guilt that belongs to someone else. The letter ended there. No dramatic accusations. No anger. Just truth. Sybil truth. The kind that changes everything. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then my father stood up slowly. He looked at my mother. "Is this true?" She didn't answer. "Linda, is this true?" Finally, she nodded. One small nod, that's all. My father looked like someone had punched him. "You kept our daughter away from her grandmother?" More tears. Another nod. "You told us she didn't care?" Silence. Then my Aunt Susan stood up. "You let Margaret die, thinking she might never see Emily again?" The room exploded with questions. Voices, shock, disbelief. And for the first time in my life, Abby wasn't the one being blamed. The truth was finally standing in the middle of the room, and my mother had nowhere left to hide. The days after the funeral were strangely quiet. Then my phone started ringing. Over and over. My mother. I didn't answer. She left voicemail after voicemail. "Please call me. We need to talk. I'm sorry." For once, I wasn't ready to hear it. Then my father called. He sounded older, tired. "I had no idea," he said. And for the first time in years, I believed him. He told me he had moved into a hotel for a few days. He needed space. He couldn't understand why my mother had lied to everyone for so long. Neither could I. Aunt Susan stopped speaking to my mother completely. Several relatives did the same. The truth spread through the family faster than I expected. People who had ignored me for months suddenly wanted to talk, to apologize, to explain. I appreciated it, but I was exhausted. Then one afternoon, Ryan came to my apartment. He looked miserable. "I should have asked questions," he said quietly. I nodded. "You should have." He wiped his eyes. "I thought Mom was protecting Grandma." So did I. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he whispered, "I'm sorry, Em." It was the first genuine apology I had received from my family in years. As for my mother, the woman who had spent so many years controlling the story had lost control of it completely. No one was yelling at her, no one was punishing her. The truth itself was the consequence. She had pushed away her mother, she had hurt her daughter, and now she was alone with the choices she had made. And for the first time in my life, AP felt something unexpected. Not anger, not revenge, just peace. A month after the funeral, I visited Grandma's grave for the first time alone. I brought fresh peach pie. It felt right. I sat on the grass for a long time, talking to her like I used to talk to her at her kitchen table. I told her about the blue box, about meeting my biological father's family, about Ryan's apology, about how quiet my life had become. Then I said the words I had been carrying in my heart for weeks. "I'm sorry I wasn't there at the end." The wind moved softly through the trees. I know it sounds silly, but in that moment, I remembered something she used to say. Love doesn't disappear just because someone leaves the room. I started crying, not the painful kind of crying, the healing kind. For the first time, I truly believed she knew I never abandoned her. A few days later, I met my biological father's sister, my Aunt Caroline. She brought old photographs, stories, letters my father had written before I was born. I spent hours looking at pictures of a man who had my eyes, my smile, my laugh. For the first time in my life, I understood where I came from. I belonged somewhere. I always had. I just didn't know it. As for my mother, I finally answered one of her calls. We met at a small coffee shop. She looked older, smaller somehow. She cried almost the entire time. She admitted everything. She said that after Michael died, she couldn't look at me without remembering what she had lost. So, instead of dealing with her grief, she pushed it onto me. "I know it wasn't your fault," she whispered. "I know that now." I listened. I even felt sorry for her, but feeling sorry for someone doesn't erase the damage they caused. I told her I forgave her, not because she deserved it, because I deserved peace. Then I told her something else. "I need distance." She cried harder, but she nodded. For once, she didn't argue. We still speak occasionally, birthdays, Christmas, short phone calls, but the relationship we had before is gone. And honestly, that's okay. Some things can be repaired, others need boundaries. I still miss my grandmother every day. I probably always will. But I don't carry guilt anymore. I don't carry blame anymore. I carry love and memories and one final gift she gave me, the truth, and sometimes the truth is enough to set you free. It's been almost 2 years since my grandmother passed away. I still think about her all the time, sometimes when I bake a peach pie, sometimes when I see fresh tomatoes at the grocery store, and sometimes for no reason at all. I still keep the blue box. It's on a shelf in my living room. Not because of the documents inside, not because of the secrets, but because it reminds me of something important. One person telling the truth can change an entire life. For years, I believed I was the problem, that I wasn't lovable enough, that I wasn't enough. I carried guilt that never belonged to me. I carried blame that should have been left in the past. And if my grandmother hadn't left that letter, Abby might still be carrying it today. Losing her was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. But strangely, her final gift gave me something I had been searching for my entire life: peace, and the courage to protect it. I learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean going back to the way things were. Sometimes forgiveness means letting go of the anger while still keeping your boundaries. Sometimes loving someone means loving them from a distance. And sometimes the family you build for yourself becomes the family that saves you. I still visit Grandma's grave every spring. I bring flowers. I bring peach pie. And before I leave, I always say the same thing. Thank you for telling me the truth, because she did, even after she was gone. So, now I want to ask you something. If you were in my place, would you forgive your mother? Would you keep a relationship with her? Or would you protect your peace and walk away completely? Tell me honestly in the comments, because I'd really love to know what you would have done. About 6 months after the funeral, I received another call from Mr. Harris. This time, I wasn't afraid. Emily, he said warmly, I found something that belonged to your grandmother. I drove to his office that afternoon. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a recipe card. At first, I smiled. Grandma had hundreds of recipes. Then I turned it over. On the back, in her familiar handwriting, was a short note. For my sweet Emily, when life hurts, bake something. Feed someone. Love someone. That's how broken hearts heal. I started crying immediately, but there was more. Folded behind the recipe card was a check. It wasn't a huge amount of money, just enough to surprise me. Along with it was another note. Take a trip. See something beautiful. You spent too many years taking care of everyone else. It's your turn now. I laughed and cried at the same time. That was my grandmother, always thinking about everyone else. A few months later, I used that money exactly the way she wanted. I rented a small cabin by a lake in Michigan. I brought Daisy. I brought old family photos. And I brought the blue box. One evening, I sat on the dock watching the sunset. The sky turned orange and pink. For the first time in a very long time, I felt completely calm. No anger, no questions, no guilt, just peace. I realized something then. My grandmother's final gift wasn't the truth. It wasn't the blue box. And it wasn't the money. It was permission. Permission to stop fighting for love that had to be earned. Permission to let go of the past. Permission to build a beautiful life anyway. I looked out across the water and smiled. Then I said something I hadn't been able to say before. I'm going to be okay, Grandma. The wind moved softly across the lake, and somehow Abby thinks she already knew.